to order. We'll have a moment of silence and the pledge led by Mr. McMillan.
Face the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
We'll have a moment of silence and the pledge led by Mr. McMillan. Happy New Year and welcome to our first work session of 2021. Our January meetings were pushed forward 1 week due to winter break, so our regular session meeting will be next Wednesday, January 13th. You'll notice that Ms. Henderson will be attending electronically this evening. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Thank you for having me and accommodating me.
Okay, great. We can hear you. Great. To our first work session of 20. Can you mute? Our January meetings were pushed forward 1 week due to winter break, so our regular.
It's the delay.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, Betsy, can you still hear us? Okay, just turn your mic on if you need us. Okay, and typically we have the agenda up on the screen, but so that Ms. Henderson, so that we can see her, we don't have that up there this evening, but we do have hard copies in the other room if anyone needs a hard copy of the agenda. Thank you to our law department representatives who met with us in executive session this afternoon at 4:30. Mr. Dupler, would you mind just giving the public an update on the purpose of executive session?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Happy to. An exception to the Tennessee open meeting law is when the board needs to meet with attorneys concerning legal matters. In this case, the Knox County Board of Education meets with the Knox County Law Department, and there's a couple cases that apply to that, both to pending legal matters and to anticipated legal matters, and that's Smith County Education versus Anderson and Van Hoosier versus Warren County Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Board members, as you are aware, Senator Becky Duncan Massey and I are hosting an electronic meeting this Friday, January 8th at 9 a.m. to provide an opportunity for us to speak with our state legislators about current and upcoming educational issues. The meeting will be live streamed on the KCS website and broadcast live on Comcast Cable Channel 10. I also wanted to mention that I will continue to follow up on our annual workshop discussion regarding the superintendent evaluation timeline and the plan to, and I plan to include that topic on our January 27th quarterly work session agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Ms. Owen.
Madam Chair, if I may, I would like to add a very brief explanation of the documents that I handed out.
Okay. We can do that at the very end after regular. Okay. All right. All right. Anything else? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McMillan, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Mr. McMillan, would you like to share with us your thoughts on our vision and mission statement?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would. Since our mission is to provide excellent learning opportunities for all students, I wanted to share some up-to-date information from my district about the Career Magnet Academy, or CMA as it's commonly referred to. It was a short time ago that this school was being considered for possible closure. So I thought it would be very appropriate to spotlight their accomplishments. Now let me just stop there for just a second. There was one person in leadership on the board and some of the supervisors who were very much in favor of closing it because it was costly and it was not doing what we originally intended it to do. And some of the kids came down, testified, and the board rallied around what they were saying. Now, I don't know, there's no way of knowing. Had they not been here, it probably would have been closed, would be my guess. But the board, after listening attentively, rallied around what they were saying, and not only did we keep it open, we changed the direction, the leadership, and it's an entirely different thing today from what it was. And it's something that we can all be really proud of. Obviously, I'm proud of it because it's in my district, but it's open to everybody. It's closer to our kids in the 8th district, but I just want to tell you a little bit more about it here. CMA has transitioned from a career path model to an early college model, due in part to its strengthened partnership with Pellissippi State Community College. Even in the midst of this challenging year, CMA has been able to continue its goal of providing a true college experience for its students and to prepare its new students for how to be successful when the time comes. And I have about 4 achievements here that, if you'll bear with me, I'd like to share with you. During the 2020 fall semester, 641 college credit hours were earned, with 81 dual enrollment students participating, including 85% of the eligible juniors and seniors. In the spring of 21, 101 dual enrollment students are on track to earn 939 credit hours. That includes over a third of the sophomores. And for 2021 school year, that's a total of 1,580 college credit hours, spread out over approximately 526 college courses. Now, this is the part that the parents should love. This achievement saved the parents $260,000 in college tuition. And finally, CMA currently has 12 seniors who will be graduating with their associate's degree from Pellissippi the week before they graduate from high school. I hope this positive report and news assures the board that CMA continues to be a good investment as they provide excellent learning opportunities for the students. And I also wish to thank Principal Matt Mosley for providing me with this updated information. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. McMillan. That's great to hear. Very nice. Okay, Mr. Thomas, we'll have the superintendent's report now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I'd like to again welcome all of our students and staff back for spring semester that began yesterday. I know that in our current environment, many of our students, families, and employees have questions about the district's plan going forward. Let me first say we're working very hard to protect the health and well-being of our school communities, just as we did in the fall. We'll continue to require masks in our building. Everyone who enters a school building must have their temperature checked. We're also continuing cleaning and sanitation protocols that were added prior to the fall semester. We believe these strategies helped us be successful in the fall, and they will allow us to safely provide virtual and in-person instruction during the spring. Of course, the vaccine, the teachers, educators have been moved up on the priority list for the vaccine, so we'll have a plan in place to make sure that all of our educators have the opportunity to get that wish to take the vaccine, and I would encourage them to do so as soon as that can possibly happen. Right now, we don't know for sure in terms of when it will be available. We're looking maybe at the end of February, early March. Hopefully, maybe something will be available earlier than that, but that's what we know right now. And I want to reiterate the importance of following the 5 core actions to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and those are observe physical distancing, wear a mask in public, practice proper hand washing, clean and sanitize surfaces, and stay home if you're sick. And we need the support of all Knox County residents, so I'm asking that each of us take these steps to help protect our school communities. I'd also like to take a few minutes and speak to the opportunity we have before us to unite as educators and public servants on behalf of our students and schools across the state of Tennessee. Last month, the Board of Education approved its legislative priorities for 2021, and members of the board will be discussing these very critical needs with our legislative delegation on Friday. These include fully funding the BEP, additional funding to increase teacher salaries, and holding educators harmless in the evaluation process this school year. Along with my counterparts in Metro Nashville, Shelby County, and Hamilton County, I had the opportunity to share our needs during yesterday's panel discussion with the House Democratic Caucus. And let me just say thank you to all the members of the Democratic Caucus that met with us virtually yesterday to provide us this opportunity to share with them. And all 4 superintendents of 4 largest school districts had an opportunity to present. Additionally, I and my regional counterparts within the Tennessee Organization of School Superintendents continue to have discussion, share ideas, and strategize on how we can emphasize to lawmakers the urgency to meet the needs of our students in schools across the state. As you're aware, Governor Lee's called for the Tennessee General Assembly to convene for a special legislative session on the 19th of this month, that's less than 2 weeks from now, to address major challenges the state's public schools are facing. For almost a year, this pandemic has created what likely has been the largest disruptions to schools in our nation's history, changing the way we must deliver K-12 education. In Knox County, we anticipate unbudgeted COVID-related costs to exceed $10 million by the end of the school year. These expenditures are primarily due to the purchase of personal protective equipment and the commitment we made to provide a virtual learning option for families. Many of these costs will be recurring. This does not include the $5 to $7 million of anticipated annual costs related to sustaining our one-to-one initiative. And as we get into budget conversations with you, we'll talk more about that. But $5 to $7 million of recurring costs just to sustain the one-to-one initiative, which I'm sure is going to stay in place once the pandemic is over. And certainly, again, thankful to the board and the county commission and also the federal dollars that came through the CARES Act for allowing us to become a one-to-one school district. But we are in an educational crisis now more than ever, and we're asking our governor and state legislature to make the education of our students a top priority. As a board, we're asking our state legislative bodies to determine the full impact on public school systems with respect to any and all proposed legislation for the upcoming year. This is vitally important as we urge the Tennessee General Assembly to hold harmless reductions in student enrollment such that BEP funding will not be negatively impacted. Since average daily membership is the primary component which generates state education funding, Knox County schools could stand to lose almost $8 million of BEP funding absent any hold harmless provision. Coupled with the growing budgetary needs resulting from the pandemic, this could be crippling to the academic success of our students. And just to put that in perspective, we compared the third 20-day enrollment period, membership period of last year with the third period this year, and we were down about 2,200 students from the same membership period from last year. So again, that could equate to about $8 million of lost funding absent of a hold harmless provision. The need for student interventions is urgent. Currently, the state funds only 41% of our costs related to intervention teachers and coaches, a gap of approximately $1.2 million that has to be covered through a combination of local and federal funding. We anticipate this to widen as the need for enhanced student intervention programs continues to grow. The funding gap is even worse when it comes to school nurses, positions especially vital now considering the state of the pandemic. In real funding, which means adjusted for the BEP fiscal capacity component, money from the state provides one school nurse for every 4,500 students in Knox County. However, the National Association of Nurses, the CDC, the American Association of Pediatrics recommends a nurse for every 750 students. To fully fund these positions, the state would need to provide about $3.6 million more to Knox County. We're also keenly aware of the growing need for student mental health supports, and one of our board's legislative priorities is to seek additional funding in this area. For instance, the funding gap for school psychologists alone is around $2.5 million and growing. We have additional concerns with respect to inadequate resources for guidance counselors and social workers. For example, in real dollars, the state provides, through the BEP formula, one guidance counselor for every 790 students in Knox County schools. The American School Counselor Association recommends one guidance counselor for every 250 students. To fully fund these positions, the state would need to provide roughly $11.5 million more to Knox County schools. Likewise, in real dollars, the state funds one social worker for every 3,700 students in Knox County schools. The National Association of Social Workers recommends one social worker for every 250 students. To fully fund these positions, the state would need to provide an additional $16 million more through the BEP formula. A similar dynamic occurs with funding our teaching positions. In real dollars, the state funds roughly half of our 4,000 teachers in our general operating budget. Obviously, we need significantly more state funding in this area. Over the coming weeks and months, the Tennessee General Assembly will have the opportunity to unite on behalf of the 960,000 public school students and their families across the state to send a clear message that Tennesseans prioritize the education of our children and youth. Research is clear that there is a correlation between educational attainment and quality of life. The future of our community and the future of our state is only as successful as our students. We realize that education is not the only issue that Governor Lee and our legislators will be contemplating, but we urge all of them to make decisions that will provide much needed financial resources to all school districts across the state of Tennessee. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. We have questions. Ms. Fab?
Yeah, I do have a question for you, and it's, I thank you for that whole update about the finances, but this is about the vaccination, because we talk about educators, and I'm hoping that that is a broader vaccination program that will deal with custodians, food service workers, and I don't know if that's been made clear or not, or if we even know, but I hope that we can push that everyone that's actually in the school on a regular basis is able to get vaccinated.
And I think that a great point, great question. I think what the wording reads, and I'll look to Scott for this, but all staff, Scott, is that? That's correct. So which would include what we would encourage to happen, I guess, is all staff, including the custodial staff and teacher assistants and everyone have that opportunity to receive the vaccination.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Watson?
Superintendent Thomas, I can validate that. I was on a call today with Michelle Pfizer, who's the doctor who's overseeing the plan for Tennessee, and she made that very point, that it is anybody who's interacting within the schools. So I think that's great that that's part of the plan, and that teachers and staff have been elevated up to 1B, which she also gave a rough timeline of that. Of course, there's no promises, but it seems like that could come as early as late February and early March in terms of timing of that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Yeah.
Appreciate you making sure that we have the correct information, so thank you.
Well, Superintendent Thomas, I have another question for you, and it's really related to the decision to move back to in-person instruction. We all know, if anybody's been following the news and what's been happening locally and what's been happening in our health department, you can't look very far without seeing people say, rightfully so for a period, that Knox County's potentially the worst county in the world in terms of COVID cases. And, that's shifted and ebbed and flowed, and I think there's 3 more now in other parts of the country that are worse than us. And we also know that the last time that this board met, the decision was made right prior to it to move to a week of virtual instruction before the end of school this past semester. And I would never want to be in your position to make that call to whether or not we come back in person instruction in a situation like this or not. And I have no doubt that you and your team took a tremendous amount of time and energy to make that call. I think it's also important for the public to be fully aware of why the particular call was made. And my intent in this question is not to question the call, but to say this is why we made the decision that we made, because I think it's important for people to understand that. I know the day we left this meeting last time, I got a tremendous amount of emails saying, why in the world did you go to virtual instruction? And then I've received over 50 emails in the last week saying, why in the world are you going back? So it doesn't matter what side, there's people on all kinds of sides of every issue, but I think it's important for the public to understand, what is the information that was used to make that call and why was that call made?
Okay, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Watson, Madam Chair, members of the board. We did, over the holidays, over the break, winter break, look at as much of the information as was made available to us. We looked at, obviously, let me talk about some of the information not available to us. Of course, student attendance rates were not available when we're not in school. Also, bus driver attendance rates, not something we could look at as one of our metrics. Cafeteria workers, not in school. So we're not looking at that. Custodial rate we could look at, obviously because they were working over the break, and substitute fill rate was not something that was available either. So some of the metrics that we used to make the decisions were not available at the time. So what did you use to make the decision? One piece of information that was available, and I think critical to the decision, was actually to look at our teacher and school-based attendance rates. We were able to look at that over the holidays. Obviously, it could have changed, and probably did change some over the holidays, but what we were seeing, the trend being in terms of our teacher attendance rate was around 95, 96%, which is for us, anything above 90% is green. And again, I know Mr. Bolton monitored that data over the holidays, looking at it, which in fact ended up correlating with what we were seeing, because the attendance rate, I think Monday wasn't a student day, but the attendance rate Monday was somewhere between 96 and 97%, I believe. School started Tuesday, yesterday, so I think we were again right around 96% attendance rate with our teachers, and today I believe we were 95.17% in terms of our teacher rate attendance. So looking at teacher rate attendance, it appeared that even though the numbers are going up in terms of the community, it appeared that we weren't going to have some of the operational issues opening school that we were faced with when we made the decision to close, I won't say close, we didn't close, we went virtual, so we still had school. But obviously the substitute fill rate, if you've got a staff at school, then you're going to need fewer substitutes. And today, what we were seeing, our substitute fill rate is still not great. It's 67%, but it's several percentage points higher than it was when we made the decision to close. I think we look at 70%, or less than 70%, I think, being read for our fill rate. So again, it's a little bit lower, but it was, I think the last time it was that high was around October 30th. So, even though our percentage rate is not great, it was still higher than what it was when we made the decision to close. Another factor we looked at and considered, and we look at daily, and it's not on the metric sheet, but the rolling 7-day average for COVID cases. And I think during the week that we were virtual, that rolling 7-day average was up to 500 plus cases, new cases. And looking at that over the break, I think along about Christmas, maybe that number started declining, going down a little bit. So it's still, the new cases, it's still much higher than what we would like for it to be, but I think as of yesterday, it was 284. When we made the decision to close, I believe it was like 432. So there's about a 34% decrease in the 7-day rolling average of new cases. So Those are, and plus, we made a commitment to the parents of 45,000 students that we would give it our best shot, best opportunity, if we could safely reopen schools, that we would do so for the parents and the students, 45,000 plus students. So those were the things we looked at over the period of the holidays that helped us, I guess, to make the decision. And as I've said, all that could change tomorrow or Friday or next week. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball to forecast that. We've all heard the predictions that after Christmas or because of the break that the increases are going to spike. And I know we're seeing that community-wide, but right now, in terms of the school system, we're today, as of today, in really good shape, I feel like, and we'll continue to look at that on a daily basis. So.
I appreciate you taking a moment to dive into all that. I know no leader wants to always justify their decisions, but I also know that in an environment like this, there is real fear on the behalf of people. And I think it's important for them, whether or not they agree with the decision or not, to know why the decision was made. So
Yes, sir.
thank you for taking that time.
And thank you. I appreciate you asking a question too, Mr. Watkins. Thank you.
Ms. Christie?
Yeah, I just have a question. Regarding the safety protocols, I don't know, it kind of seems to me that some people are very comfortable and confident in the way things are being handled, but then you do hear these pockets where very general, well, my school isn't doing this, or my school isn't, enforcing this like another school. I guess I'm curious as to what procedures we have in place, or how people can reach out to the district to voice those concerns, because, there is fear about voicing them, because I think everybody knows that teachers and staff are doing the best they can, and they don't want to, feel like they're being overly critical, but there are general concerns about safety. So I'm just curious, where do those people go, and how do they go about reporting concerns they have?
Let me be sure I understand. Concerns that
The
parents
safety
might have about their a school.
Masks being enforced,
masks.
or any of their safety guidelines, for that matter.
Certainly, if it's an issue student related, would encourage our grade level directors. I think, of course, obviously the principal is the first contact that would encourage folks to make, and then after that, our grade level directors, Mr. Danny Trent for secondary, Mrs. Julie Thompson for elementary, if there are issues around those. If it's so student-based, in our policy, we do have some consequences for if that's not being enforced or students are not following our face mask policy. I know a verbal warning is, I think, the first consequence, and maybe the second consequence also a verbal warning. Once it get past the second, I think contacting a parent. It could be a situation, well, first of all, quarantine from the general public. So if they've got that the school has a place to isolate a student who refuses to wear a mask, then to isolate that student, and then a parent pickup could also be requested if a student wishes or continues to not follow the face mask policy. From an employee standpoint, would suggest that Mr. Bolton contact Human Resources if we have employees that are not following the face mask policy. I think in our policy we refer to the civility code. I believe that it's a violation of the civility code if an employee is not following the process. And then also I think there's a reference to the employee complaints and grievance policy. And let's see, those two policies, the civility code is B230. Employee complaints and grievances is G130. So we would go through with an employee, I'm assuming, Scott, too, you help correct me if I'm wrong, but a corrective disciplinary process with the employee for violation of the board policy. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now I would like to introduce Ted Holtz from Pew CPA. He's going to update us on the internal school funds audit. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try this with my mask as long as I can do that. So, I believe recently or earlier this week, we sent out a copy of the internal school funds audit report, so each of you should have that electronically. Obviously, it's a big report, a few hundred pages, so a lot of reading in there if you want to, a lot of numbers in there as well. Basically, the activity funds covers only the activity at the schools, does not cover activity at central office. But by activity at the schools, that means everything that runs through the checking account at each individual school, so all roughly 90 schools, includes the receipts, monies collected by teachers, administrators, disbursements predominantly by check, ticket events, athletic events, school plays, that kind of thing. So a lot of activity runs through these activity funds. The audit report, we conduct our work in the summertime predominantly and wrap it up early fall, communicate findings to the bookkeepers and the director of, supervisor of internal school funds, and then we start working on the report, which takes a little while as well. During our testing, we test activity, multiple transactions at each school in all aspects. So it's a healthy amount of testing, and basically we take over a room in the Sarah Simpson building for a couple months to get that work done. In your audit report, I'll walk you through that pretty quickly, or at least certain aspects. Initially, I think it's Roman numeral, I don't want to use the pages at the very bottom because I don't have the PDF pages with me, but it's Roman numeral 2 to Roman numeral 4 is our audit opinion. And as a warning, it's a unique audit opinion because it basically says that the report is not in agreement with GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, but instead is in agreement with the Tennessee Accounting Policy Manual, which is what we're required to be in compliance with. We follow the Tennessee Accounting Policy Manual, and it is a clean opinion in regards to that manual. And we'll note that a year ago, we actually had 2 schools where there were exceptions to that because of record keeping regarding receipts. So it's good that we're back to a true clean opinion for fiscal year 2020. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but the period covered was last school year, July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. After the audit opinion on pages 1 through 4 is really a summary of the balance sheet on the first 2 pages, and then summary of the income statement on the next 2 pages. And while there's a bunch of, individual transactions are not significant in what we audit, at least from a dollar perspective, total dollars are very significant. The total cash held at the end of the year was between all schools was roughly $11.9 million. So a healthy amount of money. As far as revenues coming in and out for the school year, revenues were like $18.1 million. And this is down from about $20 million or just over that the year before, but obviously it was an interesting year with COVID during the impacting the latter part of the school year. So that's why the numbers are a little bit down if you're comparing numbers, at least from a revenue expense standpoint to the prior year. What gets a lot of attention in this report, I'll get to that in just a second. After those first 4 pages, then you have basically individual balance sheets and income statements for all schools. So every school will have its own balance sheet and income statement. And then there's scheduled supplemental payments made, scheduled interfund transfers, and then you get to the very back of the report, which is the compliance section, which is the section which garners the most attention. So part of the audit, part of it is, we are testing all these transactions, so we have to report what findings we have. And the findings start on page 331 and go through page 342. And I'll recap what they are. Segregation of duties is the first one, and I guess just as an overall, findings are up slightly from a year ago. as far as number of instances across the board, not in every category, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but when you consider that, in early to mid-March, we went virtual, and then, trying to catch up with accounting policies and authorizations, it did make it difficult. So I think it's kind of understandable that we had some areas where findings increased. Segregation of duties is one area that went down. We had 47 schools that had a segregation of duties exception, down from 55 a year ago, and really a few years prior to that, we were at about 80 schools. So this is one area. It's difficult to have a perfect system of accounting controls when you basically have a bookkeeper and a principal, but there's been a concerted effort to make the controls as strong as possible in many of these schools. So the fact that we have an exception in this area that's continuing to decline, I think is a very positive note. And that's the root of all potential issues is not having the segregation of duties the way you would like them to be. Because if controls are in place, it's harder for something that shouldn't happen to happen. Second finding, it deals with, it dealt with negative fund balances, and there were about 4 cases this year. I think it's approximately what it was a year ago. Disbursements is the third area, and disbursements were down slightly. 63 schools had a challenge with that. And keep in mind, we're testing about 20 transactions at each school, so disbursements might mean there wasn't a proper authorization or wasn't supporting invoice for an item that we tested. Receipts had 58 exceptions, which is up from 47 schools the year before. Purchase orders slightly up. Ticket reconciliations about the same. We had issues at 6 schools. Fundraising activities had issues in about half the schools, which is up a little bit from the year before. And fundraising and resale activities. School support organizations continue to be a challenge as far as having them registered. Approval of transfers is an accounting process. We didn't see any issues with the transfers that were made, but there is an approval process in place that was a challenge. Travel policy is an area that was a significant issue a couple years ago, and a new process was put in place, I want to say 2 years ago, and we're down to just 7 issues at 7 schools, where it was much higher than that a couple years ago, and unclaimed property regulations regarding that. But those are the areas pretty much similar to what we had a year ago, although, as I mentioned earlier, we had an exception at 2 schools for lack of receipts, lack of documentation of receipts in 2019, and that was corrected. So that's an encouraging thing, and it got you to where you're back to having your standard audit report for all schools. A lot of information in here. I'll open up for any questions.
More questions? Okay.
I will say the audit wouldn't be possible without the help of Garrett and his team. Heidi Murray, we have regular contact with, the bookkeepers. We don't have contact with them during the summer while they're off, but when they're back in the school, as soon as they come back to school, not only they have to meet with the principal and everything getting ready for the school year, they have to deal with us too. So, and results are also discussed with management, Garrett and Ron McPherson and the superintendent as well. So as auditors, we're pleased to see the involvement of management in this process.
Okay, great. If we don't have any questions, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
And for all that work. Thanks very much. Okay, and now we'll move to our Project Grad annual report with Miss Ronnie Chandler, who is the Project Grad National Executive Director. Welcome, Ronnie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, counselor, Superintendent Thomas, and staff. Happy New Year. I've included a brief refresher of the KCS Grad agreement for the benefit of new members. In 2018, KCS entered a new 5-year memorandum of agreement for FY19 to FY23 to continue to provide the Grad program established in 2001, 20 years ago this year, with annual updates to be provided. Grad is a K through 16 college and career access and success education program working elementary through post-secondary. The leaders we need tomorrow are in our public schools today. At the highest level of our work, we are infusing hope and opportunity for amazing kids, many who must navigate concentrated challenges not of their own making. Grad has sister sites in Houston, Akron, Cincinnati, and Kenai Peninsula, Alaska. Like you, we are advocates of public education, serving brilliant kids from a strength-based and asset-based approach. A full list of schools served is on page 1 of the MOA, but include Austin East, Fulton, their feeder middle schools, Vine and Whittle Springs, and 10 elementary schools. We also walk with grad scholars after high school through post-secondary, whether that be accredited trade technical program or traditional 2-year, 4-year college. The district benefits from the K through 16 grad approach, but the new 5-year MOA specifically restricts district funding to high school expenses only at an amount of $700,000 annually, and we honor that designated restriction. Private sector funders, donors, partners, and sponsors provide for grad administrative support, elementary and middle school opportunities, and post-secondary support that includes early college and career awareness and hands-on experiences for children K through 8, post-secondary success coaching, grad alumni engagement, grad summer institutes provided by Pellissippi, UT, and TCAT Knoxville, the grad $4,000 scholarship, WATE grad laptop telethon, and grad Hands on the Future employer-paid summer internships. There is a diverse workforce business case for grad that draws industry partners. In April 2020, the Grad Board of Directors voted for the creation of a new startup education foundation as the long-term sustainability funding strategy to continue the grad program into the future. That action followed a study with recommendations from a joint task force appointed by the Great Schools Partnership Board, the Project Grad Board, and had KCS representation. The Knox Education Foundation is that new nonprofit organization championing public and private support and innovation for public education in Knox County and is a strategic partner for Knox County Schools. Governance and funding for grad, community schools, Leaders for Readers, Teacherpreneur were brought together as initiatives in the new foundation. We already had shared back office functions since 2013. Great Schools Partnership was sunset. The EIN, 501c3, and Charter of Grads Incorporation changed for Knox Ed. A foundation board of directors was seated. The Project Grad Board of Directors transitioned to a board of advisors, and a Knox Ed Foundation CEO was hired. Established Project Grad programming continues as part of Knox Ed and continues as the Project Grad Knoxville brand, with the Project Grad Knoxville Executive Director, and continuation of the 2018 negotiated Memorandum of Agreement through FY23 was specifically honored in creation of the foundation and continues as new opportunities develop. Despite many challenges, more than 600 AE and Fulton alumni have completed a post-secondary credential since the first 2005 grad cohort, and 2 work full-time on the grad team. One is the team leader at Fulton, where she went to high school, and the other is a grad post-secondary success coach. The grad program advocates for and supports about 6,800 K-12 students each year, along with over 250 grad scholars in post-secondary. 92% of the K-12 district students supported by Grad reside in 5 zip codes that have some of the highest documented concentrated challenges and disparities in the city. 37914, 37915, 1721 and 20. Students served or diverse. The most recent state report card data indicates that the students we serve are 49.8% Black and African American, 29.5% white, 20% Latinx, and 1% are students who identify as Asian, Native, multiracial. 59.4% are economically disadvantaged according to the state's new definition. However, the state report card percentage includes only those who self-report use of public assistance and does not include those who keep that information private or families without documentation who cannot access public assistance, Tennessee Promise, or financial aid. Information provided by KCS Research in 2018 shared that economically disadvantaged percentage was really more 86%. And we know those families probably have not gained wealth. The current agreement addresses 3 targets, mutually determined by Knox County Schools and Grad, and relates to the KCS restricted funding, graduation rates, post-secondary enrollment rates, and the number of Austin East and Fulton graduating seniors qualifying for the Grad Scholarship. And that criteria is indicated there in number 3, graduate on time with their class with a 2.5 or higher GPA, and complete 2 summer institutes or allowable substitutions like Governor's School, Upward Bound, academic camps on post-secondary campuses. Specific details on calculations of the metrics are provided for the board in the attachment titled Calculating Metrics. The first slide represents metric 1 and targets for AE. Project Grad will contribute to increased high school graduation rates by aligning intentional student supports with school-based initiatives. And the MOA target there is assist KCS in increasing the graduation rates at each school by 1.5% each year. The blue bars indicate the goals, and the orange bars indicate the outcomes. At far right, the goals and outcomes are provided in table form, and the shaded box on the right indicates the number of students reported as the high school's cohort and the number of graduates. Again, definition of terms are provided in the calculating metrics document, and the state defines a cohort as the number of students who started at the school in 9th grade. The district's graduation rate is shown in green above the bars. For year 2, the metric 1 AE goal was 78.8%, and the outcome was 78.2%, again reflected in the second set of bars. And the same metric for Fulton, with the same target adjusted to their specific graduation rate. The metric 1 goal for Fulton was 74.5%, and the outcome was 80.3%. Again, the second set of bars reflects that comparison. Metric 2 reflects the post-secondary enrollment, and you'll note on this metric it reports prior year, as grad scholars have up to 1 year to enroll in post-secondary and activate their scholarship. Project Grad will work with KCS to increase the post-secondary enrollment rate of graduates at Austin East and Fulton High Schools according to the KCS National Clearinghouse data and verified accredited non-clearinghouse institutions like Berea College, TCAT Knoxville. The clearinghouse is a fee-based membership, and not all accredited institutions pay to join it. So when grad scholarship recipients enroll in an accredited institution that's not a member of the clearinghouse, we report those enrollment. And again, examples there are TCAT Knoxville and Berea College. The AE goal for year 2 was 41.1%, and the outcome was 49.6%. And again, tables provided to the right indicate those numbers. And for Fulton, the same metric, the goal was 50.6%, and the outcome was 50.8%. Again, the second set of bars indicates that information. The third metric combines the number of AE and Fulton graduating seniors who qualify for the grad scholarship as one cohort for the graduating year. Project Grad will increase the number of seniors that qualify as a grad scholarship recipient. The target is increase the proportion of senior cohort members that are PGK scholarship recipients by 4.5% each year. The grad class cohort is tracked beyond high school by the grad college and career success coaching that is provided outside of the MOA. But the year 2 goal was 37.8%, and the outcome was 45% with 147 recipients. We've added a COVID-related data note to the year 2 update. Approximately 48 days were lost when the 2019-20 school year ended on March 12th, approximately a fourth of the school year. However, not all days lost were significant to data outcomes. It is suspected, however, that the real impact from school disruptions due to COVID will be most evident during the current 2021 year. With that consideration, the following suggestion is made for assessing 2021 school year and COVID impact if there is a related district decline. For example, the KCS district rate for 2020 is 91%. If the KCS graduation rate for 21 were to decline by 3%, the grad metrics would be adjusted down by 3% as well. Metric 1 references that grad provide intentional supports that align with school-based initiatives. Last year I took the board through almost 3 dozen slides with detailed information on aligned supports. This year a summary was provided in the attachments titled 2019 Yearbook and the summary overview of PGK post-secondary supports. Grad continues to deepen and grow supports for district students served by PGK. Of particular interest are new initiatives to strengthen and grow established programming. Partnerships and sponsorships are growing despite COVID through established relationships and referral of grad as a respected, trusted community resource. A Mentor Me Grad pilot is gearing up. For grad, alumni professionals will virtually mentor current post-secondary grad scholars. The Grad Scholars Advisory Board is re-energized and has renamed themselves Ascend, assisting scholars in college and career to elevate, navigate, and develop. There is a PGK alum on the Project Grad Board of Advisors, and he actually chairs one of the board committees on college and career success and alumni engagement. We're expanding Grad Summer Institute and internship opportunities. A new summer institute was delayed from last year due to COVID. That is an advanced manufacturing experience that we'll have in 2021. And we're adding short-term certificate opportunities within existing institutes. We're expanding career emphasis in grad K-8 college and career fairs. We're adding what is an apprenticeship, and we had created a new straight-to-work fair for 2020 that was delayed by COVID, but all of the vendors have committed to come back when we are able, circumstances allow. A middle school academy with social justice theme has been created by the UTK Vice Chancellor's Office of Diversity and Engagement. The 2021 pilot will be for grad-supported middle schools, Vine and Whittle Springs. And Project Grad Knoxville is part of the Women's Fund of East Tennessee Strong Women, Strong Futures Network, collaboratively focusing on changing the narrative that keeps women and girls who are from low income from pursuing certificates and degrees beyond high school. And that Strong Women, Strong Futures social media campaign is anticipated to launch in mid-spring this year. In addition to the MOA supports and PGK programming that is K through 16, we're supporting the build-out of the Knox Education Foundation, the launch of the Knox Ed Foundation, and welcoming and introducing a new foundation CEO, Chris Letzos, during a worldwide pandemic shutdown is a challenge. Yet Knox Ed is creating some opportunities already. Knox Ed provided leadership for the eNox collaboration, providing internet access for all children. The foundation created At Home with Knox Ed, virtual learning resources at knoxed.org. presented an Unmask Your Feelings student art contest in partnership with the Knoxville Museum of Art, has completed a NOCSED study on increasing teacher diversity, created and awarded for the first time Principalpreneur grants, and a video project is planned for spring 2021 that will introduce short-term stackable industry certifications as a career pathway. We're going to create and test a pilot video with Grad for AE in Fulton, then NOCSED plans to offer that district-wide. In closing, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to continue to serve brilliant kids in our public schools, and Madam Chair, that concludes my update.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler. Do we have questions? Mr. Watson?
Yes. So, Ronnie, in full disclosure, you and I get the chance of working together with the organization that I run with the Strong Women, Strong Futures campaign, and I just want to thank you for being such a tremendous advocate for education and for our young people and the passion that you and your team display. I do have a couple questions. One is, you all, with the help of Knox County Schools, because it's a team effort, knocked out a lot of your metrics, knocked it out of the park, but there was some decline in graduation rates between 18 and 19. Do you have any sense of what's behind that decline? And I know it's not just up to Project Grad. I know there's a ton of factors, but.
So as we are looking at what is impacting both of our high schools are very different.
Yep.
And so before answering that, I probably would want to hear from the principals.
Okay. And then the last question that I have is, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just not sure. Is there anything that's fundamentally shifted with Project Grad's work with the start of NOCSED?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, I had one thing. I've had a couple of people that are connected with Tennessee Promise that are concerned about the percentage of students across the board who are filling out the FAFSA because the deadline is February 1st. And I know AE and Fulton are way down last year. Is that something that Project Grad assists with FAFSA or not?
It actually, yes, and I'm pretty sure our numbers of all eligible students who are eligible to apply for Tennessee Promise are actually up at one of the schools for Fulton. Yes, this is Tanisha Baker.
Welcome.
That is correct. In assessing those numbers, often they look at entire student body, and so what we try to do is frame those numbers within those that are actually eligible to apply. And so if you look, there was a shift though this year with more of a concentrated effort where they actually virtual and in person contacted each family, each student, and the numbers are much higher. But again, we have a good population of students that aren't eligible to apply for FAFSA, and so we have to separate those numbers really to get an accurate assessment of that.
Okay, so any student that is going to post-secondary would need to fill out the FAFSA. So what would be that requirement?
So for instance, our undocumented students, some of our refugee students,
okay,
they're not able
gotcha.
to, and we have a growing population in both.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Okay, and now I would like to introduce our Assistant Superintendent and Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Ron McPherson. He will go over the general purpose financial position and bring us up to speed. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. So, as you know, we're keeping a close eye on sales tax collections. That's a big driver for our revenue. We did get our fourth data point in. Keep in mind that sales tax were 2 months in arrears, so this fourth data point means October. And I'm pleased to say that it continues to be positive. So when we ran the numbers, we look at trend information. We are projecting an annual surplus of $22.7 million. Again, there's a lot of the year left. And if you remember last month when I addressed this that was through 3 data points through September. Our annual projection at that point in surplus was $22.2 million. And though the news had been positive all along, there was, we wanted to be really cautious because the surplus had decreased each month, our forecasted surplus. But then in October, a little bit of an uptick, right? So we're holding steady through a third of the year. I will say this, though, that economists across the country and the data that they're looking at suggests that November and December may not be quite as positive as they had hoped. Doesn't mean it's bad, just maybe not as good as initially hoped for. Now, what does that mean for our community? We really don't know, because we don't necessarily correlate to national trends here. We will have the November numbers in a couple of weeks, and so that will be helpful. I can tell you, though, that the good news for us, as I've stated before, is we budgeted very conservatively. We are running right now at a 15% surplus over budget on the revenue side. And we're actually running about 7.5% more in actual collections as compared to this time last year. And so, as you know, this time last year, COVID was not really on the radar, especially with respect to economic trends and so forth. So we're trending pretty well. I do think the revenue picture will become much more clear in about 10 to 12 weeks. And the reason for that is by then we will have the holiday spending, November and especially December. We will have those data points in that we can look at, because those are pretty significant with regards to the proportion of total revenue on the sales tax side. We will also have December and February postings for property tax revenue. And the reason that's important is about 70% of our total property tax collections are received in December and February. And so right now, up until this point, we still don't really have enough data under our belt to make any meaningful forecasts for property tax. By then we will. And property tax accounts for about 20% of our budget, of our revenue budget. So that's a significant revenue stream as well. But what we know now, based on the information we have in our postings, we're still holding steady, holding pretty good with regards to revenue. I will say this, though, regardless of how much or how fortunate we are on the level of surplus we will close into this year's budget, we need every penny of that and more, because as Mr. Thomas has already mentioned, for this year alone, we suspect, or we are anticipating spending about $10 million unbudgeted costs related to COVID. Primarily that relates to our virtual learning initiative and personal protective equipment as well. And so also I think we have that. Hopefully we can cover that through surplus collections, but we'll also need considerable amount of reserve going into the next budget year, right? Because to what extent will COVID still be around, and to what extent will those will be the need for the dollars to address that? I don't think virtual learning is going away, as Mr. Thomas has said. This pandemic has created a whole new instructional delivery models for dealing with that. So I think the question is, to what degree will that continue? Also, Mr. Thomas mentioned the one-to-one initiative. As you're aware, we funded the bulk of that as we roll that out through CARES dollars, federal grant money. We are keeping a close eye on what this new wave of money will look like. We don't have, we're trying to chase down the information right now. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks that will be forthcoming. I think the states have to get their arms around what it means for them, and then once that happens, then they have to determine what it means for the districts in that state, because the money flows through the state. So we're keeping our fingers crossed on that. I won't even try to speculate on what that will look like at this point. Although it does appear help is on the way. That will provide great relief to not only this year, hopefully next year as well. But we need to find a way at some point for this one-to-one initiative to work that into the budget. right? Because that's a recurring cost. We're looking at $5 to $7 million a year. So at some point, we'll have to work that in. Also, compensation enhancements for the upcoming year. We're going to take a hard look at that like we do every year. That's usually one of the first priorities that we have, and we were unable to give those for this year. Other than step increases, we were unable to give percentage salary increases. We're also looking at health insurance, and there are significantly more participants on the health insurance plan than in the prior year. And right now, just that cost alone could reach as much as $2 million more than what we spend. So we'll have to budget for that, obviously. We also, as you recall, we had some reductions in our base budget going into this year, and the first thing that always comes to my mind are school allocations. We reduced those by 50%. And some schools are struggling right now because they also had a reduction in football ticket sales, gate sales. And so it's likely we're going to have to, for some schools, we're taking a look at, how much do we need to assist them for the remainder of this year. But particularly, we need to look hard at restoring those cuts back up to the levels that they were. And then also textbooks. That's always one that's a kind of a high dollar item. We did not even purchase the ELA adoption for this year. For the upcoming year, I believe it's math coming up. For the last couple of years, to fully implement that adoption cycle, you're looking at $7, $8, $9 million. We have been able, in the past, for the last several years, been able to cover some of those costs through fund balance dollars. Hopefully these surplus, if we continue the trend in revenue for the remainder of the year, the surplus dollars, if they're there, those will obviously close into fund balance. That would help greatly with the textbooks initiative as well. We also had a host of needs. I won't go over all of those, but there were a lot. A host of needs that were requested in this current budget year. We were seriously looking at. When COVID hit, we just started rolling things off, right? And the things that always jump out in my mind, I won't go over all of them, but included in that were increases to intervention supports. And we do have intervention supports. We need more. And especially in light of what we've gone through this year, I suspect that we'll need that even more than we did the previous year. So we need to look hard at that. Same thing with mental health supports. We were looking to bolster the resources for that, and I think we need to take a hard look at that. So, again, this new stimulus package, we're very hopeful that could help mitigate some of these issues with the budget. With the new presidential administration, will there be another stimulus bill come through? Don't know. But that's something we can hope. But anyway, we're operating still with a lot of unknowns. But as we go more and more into the year, some of this begins to take a little bit more focus, not only with regards to revenue, but expenditures as well. So I would just say, again, we remain cautiously optimistic, but we know that this upcoming budget will be challenging, like every other budget. I've never seen a budget yet where the needs didn't exceed the resources. So whatever surplus dollars we have, we need to use those wisely and very strategically. And so that's budget status right now in a nutshell. Be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
I have a question.
Oh, Betsy, yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. McPherson. Thank you for that report. I know that the governor and the legislative leaders have said that they want to hold the school districts harmless. And I believe I've heard you say that there's more than one way to do that, and some ways are more helpful than others. So I was wondering if we could get maybe a one-pager that explains what we need our legislators to do to hold us harmless in a way that would be most helpful to our district. Would that be a possibility?
Yes, that's a very good point. Yes, we can do that. Yeah, so hold harmless can mean a lot of different things. In other boards across the state have had resolutions in their priorities asking to be held harmless. I think I've actually seen some boards say very specifically, don't give us any less money than you did the year before. That we don't want to settle for that, right? And that's why we want to tie it back more so to average daily membership, because that's a primary component. And so we tie it to average daily membership. What we're really saying is hold us harmless with that, because that's the primary driver. And if we were held harmless in the sense that we received just level funding, that would be very hard on us as well. Because typically, just with natural growth, we could receive $7-8 million a year on that. Not only that, coupled with the fact that if we're not held harmless, as Mr. Thomas said, that could be $8 million or more going the other way. So yeah, there's a lot of repercussions from that. So if you'd like, yes, we can. If that's what you need, maybe just kind of a little bullet points on the difference.
I appreciate that. And I just had one other thing to say. I appreciate you bringing up that teacher pay is a top priority. And I believe that our teachers and staff have been doing an amazing job this year to ensure that our children are safe and they're learning. I know that the budget's still in flux. I completely understand that. But I believe, I just want to reconfirm, and we all need to reconfirm that our commitment to increase their salaries and just make that a priority. I know there's lots of other programs that we want to fund, but, I think teacher pay is a top priority so it doesn't continue to fall behind. And I know that we had discussed a bonus, but I think, that's a one-time payment that won't be factored into their retirement. I don't think it'll help us recruit and retain teachers. I just think that we need, we're the last in the major counties in the state, and we're behind neighboring districts in our region, and I just want to do well by our teachers. Just wanted to reiterate that a little bit more.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ron, I'm not sure that you are the one to answer this, but if not, just say so. There's been a lot of talk about the virtual and about, for whatever reason, and I'm not placing any blame on anybody. I'm sure that in some places, teachers have done amazing work with what they have had to work with. But, if the kids do not sign on for the period and everything, so where I'm going is, if we have a lot of kids that are failing or are behind, would we probably do that as a separate session, or would we just work that into the regular calendar year?
Do you mean with regards to interventions?
Yeah.
Okay. I may need to turn to John on that. I don't know, Mr. Thomas, okay.
Yeah. Dr. Isaac?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. So I think a couple things I've heard Mr. Thomas say, and I think Ron say too, that, virtual is probably here to stay. And so I'll try to answer that two ways. I'll try to answer what you're talking about, what seems more like kind of like a learning loss or a makeup time kind of thing, maybe like a virtual summer school. I mean, just thinking those kinds of things.
Yeah.
What we're hearing is that there's potential, the funds that Ron has mentioned that were this next batch, that is one of the buckets that could potentially be fundable, that it could be like a learning loss. So they're not saying specifically summer school, and we don't know what all that means yet, but we know it's been identified as one of those. And I think, Mr. Trent and Ms. Thompson both have already started thinking through what could that look like in those kinds of things. So I think one of the answers to the question is, yes, I think there could be some potential additional time, not in the traditional school year, that we would have for that. But when Mr. Thomas and Mr. McPherson speak to kind of virtual is here to stay, I think here's where the pandemic has kind of forced us, which has been in some ways great because it's made us have to learn quickly. And we've, to your point, we've had some teachers do some incredible things and make exponential growth. And what we've seen is some kids really take to that. But we also know, as we said early on, that, we've been doing in-person for 100 years, and we've been doing this for 6 months. And I think we're learning a lot of lessons every day to that. So I think where we would like to see, that we don't know that it's for everybody all the time, but we think that what we're trying to do through our research team right now is trying to create kind of a profile of a virtual learner, who's being successful. And we also know this, that as we learn, we want to get better at virtual. So just because it may be for a certain demographic right now, or a certain student or a certain age level of student, that doesn't mean we don't need to continue to grow virtually to help with other students as well. But I think that yes, there will be a time where there's probably a little more like a transfer, if you're going to transfer to a magnet school or a magnet program, something like that, where you're looking at this, and there'll probably be some prerequisites that you've been able to show that you could have success in that. But right now in the middle of the pandemic, that's a little harder to be able to limit that. So I think, but again, I think we're learning a lot about that, and we'll probably will be for the next 2 or 3 years as we kind of get better at it.
The governor and the legislature are aware that this exists.
The virtual programming?
Right. I mean, that there's a problem with some kids not being up to speed. I read something somewhere the other day, or heard something, I can't remember what it was, but about that there was talk, because it was so many of them that were behind, that I'm sure they'll have I talked to Dave Wright today, and we got interrupted. His wife called, so we didn't conclude our conversation, or we did conclude it quickly. But we're going to talk again. But we were talking specifically about what they're going to do next week over there, what he anticipates. And surely, if they did come with some kind of a mini summer school or something, they would send the money, would you not think?
Again, as Ron said, I mean, we're just getting the beginnings of hearing what that could potentially be. But what we've heard is that that could be one of the ways, is one of the categories that this money could be used for, because there's always kind of restrictions to what it's for, but could be to try to mitigate some of the learning loss. And so they haven't, we don't know exactly what that means, but our thinking is that we need to be moving toward opportunities outside of just the school year. Again, it's not mandatory, but it's one of the situations where you can make that up. The other part to that, Mr. McMillan, is I don't know that anyone who says we know the full impact of what this has been is probably guessing, or they might have small sample data at this point. So the other thing we know is kids are pretty they learn quick, they modify quick, and they adapt quick too. So we won't know, and we'll have to probably continue to progress monitor this for the next couple of years to see. Kids may actually be doing better than we think, and they could be doing worse. I mean, we just kind of look through those to see what that looks like. The good thing is everybody's going through it, so it's not unique to us. So so we'll work through that.
But I guess this would, I agree with everything you said there, but I guess this would just be conjecture on your part to answer this, but whenever we work our way through this, you do not anticipate us having near the number that we presently have on virtual, do you?
Well, I mean, I think, again, I don't think any of us predicted we'd have the number we did, on a regular year, that a third of the population would have chosen that. So no, I would say I wouldn't anticipate that, no. But I will say this too, there are other large districts that have had, prior to the pandemic, they've had a virtual program or a virtual school, and we've had that at a smaller scale. So I think, this causes us to expand that. There are a lot of other places besides just a student being fully on virtual, that we think there are places where that could help. Homebound students, potentially having access to more classes, things like that. So, so I think we're beginning to see where it makes sense and where it doesn't, and that we've had some folks say this has been a great thing for them and their family too. So, Again, as we continue to learn that, we'll see. But yeah, I wouldn't expect it to stay a third of the district.
No, well, I wouldn't either. I'm sure it's been a learning experience, but, I would, once we work our way through this, and we will one way or another, eventually, I would hope that we'll see more and more, kids going back to school. Parents want them to go back. They want to go back, because I just think that even if they do well with virtual, I think they miss out on a lot of, I enjoyed particularly my high school years. I really enjoyed them, and I just think, if I'd had to experience something like that, I lived in a rural area. I didn't see all that many people that lived around me that were my age, so.
Very true.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Isaac. Okay. All right. We'll move into discussion on our budget. Thank you all for all those presentations and great information. So we will move to items and contracts. Do we have questions on 1 or 2? Okay, 3 or 4? 5 or 6? Or 7? Okay, any questions on the board policy? Okay, the grant that is listed as A was withdrawn, but if I'm not mistaken, we are getting additional information and that will come back to before us in February. Is that correct, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. All right, so that will be before us again. Okay, any questions on any of the other grants, B, C, or D? Okay, and then we're moving into contracts. Any questions on that contract? Okay, and then regular agenda items. Do we have questions on A or B? Ms. Henderson, did you have a question on B?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? I have one question, Ms. Owen, you may be able to answer this. Are we receiving information from class weekly regarding the articles or data, that kind of information?
Anytime the legislature is in session, yes.
We usually do, okay.
And
but not,
they give us other things, additional things, whenever something comes up, whenever they see that something may be happening, we do get those. But when they're not in session, there's not really anything. They would just be guessing. As soon as the legislature begins session, there will be a deadline when all of the bills have to be filed. And there will be hundreds and hundreds of bills filed. I think during the last session, there were well over 300 bills just related to education. Mm-hmm. So they have to sift through everything and pull those out. And as soon as those bills are filed, they will start giving us reports, and then I'll start forwarding them on to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to ask one other thing, and probably this is maybe of you, Ms. Owens, because with the special session, which is obviously so concentrated on education, do we think class will, I'm just wondering how we can kind of stay up to date with what's going on. Do you think class will be keeping us up on things, or?
Absolutely. They are always there.
Okay.
Anytime I have been in Nashville, they are there.
Okay.
And they work with other folks who are there as well, and they sort of divide and conquer because, there are multiple meetings going on at the same time, so they make sure that someone is covering all of those meetings, and they're covering them in person, and they're talking to legislators all day, every day.
Okay, I just think that special session is going to be so critical to us, and since basically the whole thing is about what we're doing, so thank you.
As soon as they know, they'll let us know.
Okay, thank you.
And you're still having, you continue even not while they're not in session to have the weekly meetings, the weekly calls.
Earlier in the fall, we didn't, but it
Now.
starts now. Yeah, we had
A bit of a break.
sort of as needed, but now they will be weekly, yes.
Okay, great. Anything else on this class contract? Okay? All right, we will move to Ms. Owen's agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just take a really short second on this. I just want to make sure everybody understands why I'm giving you this data, apparently for no reason. We've gotten a lot of emails with a lot of information from a lot of different people, and it all seems to be conflicting. And looking at it and sifting through it, I keep going back to the state data download. And the state data download is very useful, but it's also very, very cumbersome. I went right at the beginning of this meeting to double check some numbers, and it's so cumbersome that I couldn't actually check it because I couldn't get the whole thing to download. If I look at just the COVID data, there are 20 columns of it and thousands of lines because they have a line of data every day for every county in the state. So sorting through that it's just crazy. So what I've been doing is going through and just sorting the columns and then taking out Knox County and dropping it in another spreadsheet just so I can understand what it actually says. Well, then you get into this thing of the 20 columns, and some of them are somewhat duplicated. So I wanted to find a way that we could have the information without trying to figure out which information is correct every single day. So I went through and pulled out the main things that people have been talking to us about. And I just kept those. And as I looked at it, I thought, I don't know if this will even make sense. And so I sent it to Mr. Watson, who was very kind to look at it and tell me whether it made sense. And he saw some better ways to show it than just putting it in a spreadsheet. And so put it into a chart. So this is just raw from the state data for you, a couple of different ways to look at it so that we know that we have the same thing the state has on their website. I guess that's probably all you need to know about it. It's just there if you need it, if you want it. If there's some other way that would be easier to see it, I would be glad to pull that out too. I'm not the chart master though, so so I appreciate that Mr. Watson was willing to look at it and help me out with that. But there's no purpose in this. I'm not trying to show anything. It's just the data so that everybody can see it. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Fab will move to public forum.
Thank you. We have one person on public forum, Ms. Tanya Coates.
Tanya Coates, Knox County residents. Yes, I apologize. I'm doing two things at one time, so I apologize. So I was going to get up here and speak, but Mr. Watson must have been thinking we had some emoji going on, right? When he asked the question earlier about our rationale from Knox County Schools, why we went back. But then as I thought about this before I came up here today, I want you all to know that we are never at odds. Educators are going to do whatever it takes to help educate our kids in Knox County schools. I think sometimes people think if our jobs were any easier, that we would be paid for nothing. But I want people that are at home to know this, that we don't take our jobs lightly. It is hard. I too, Mr. Watson, along with the Knox County Education Association and every educator in Knox County, don't want to be in the shoes of Mr. Thomas. It is a hard and difficult decision to do what's right for everyone. But when it comes to our jobs, we think that sometimes actions speak louder than words. and we feel like we're not appreciated sometimes, or as if people don't care about what's really going on with us. And I had a different perspective after I too contracted COVID and been sick for the last 20 days plus. Now I'm up to day 24, so don't worry about it. I'm trying to make sure that I'm following the guidelines as well. But we never want to be at odds. This virus is attacking us on every different level. And it's attacking us on public education that you have no control over. You have seen all too well yourself that we need more funding for public education than anything. Dr. Reiswick just stood up here and said that other districts have had the technology and devices. We just came to fruition of doing that. But now it's time to a point that we're asking that from my own state president, saying it's time for legislators, it's time for local people to actually understand that all the things that educators do, it's time for a bonus and a raise. I know that we have challenges with our funding here in Knox County, but teachers are working tirelessly. We have done our job from day one. We weren't ready back in March. We can agree with you. We were not ready. We didn't have the tools ready to help our kids. But we agreed to use the $7 million to get one-to-one for our kids. We used the $7 million to get educators that did not have laptops in our own classrooms. And I think I shocked Mr. Thomas when I told him that we have educators that don't have laptops in our school district. But some things are out of your control, and we just ask for your grace and mercy, because this virus is causing us to pit each other against each other, and there's no way that we should be doing that. We should be trying to lift each other up and figuring out how can we do what's best for all educators in our district. I just ask you that when I made that statement about us being remotely, when I thought about that, I also said that it's incumbent on parents to do their job at home. Ask us to help us. You employ Mr. Thomas, but he can't do his job if he doesn't have the support from you. I said if parents cannot guarantee that they did not go visit Granny, they didn't go to the beach, or they didn't get one of the 2 million people didn't get on an airplane, they can't guarantee that they didn't do what was asked of them. And so thus is causing anxiety, angst, and frustration from educators, and they can't do their job without the support and earnest knowing that you support them. I just heard what Ms. Henderson just said, that teachers need to have due diligence of making sure that they are taken care of. That's all we're asking. Is sometimes just say thank you for doing what you're doing instead of penalizing us for what we're not doing. And again, Mr. Thomas, I thank you. I can't do your job. I don't want your job. And I'm sure that your administration is praying that you stay in your job. And thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Coates, for coming to speak. That concludes public forum.
Thank you, Ms. Babbs. Do we have any comments for board forum?
I wanted to say something quickly.
Yes,
Hello,
go ahead,
sorry.
Ms. Henderson.
I was getting some feedback earlier that the live stream and the cable feed had cut out, so a couple people missed Mr. Watson's question and some of the explanation by Superintendent Thomas. So can we go back to that a little bit so that more of the community can hear about why we are back in person? Thank you.
I'm sure you'd love to go through that again, Mr. Thomas.
I know, I'm so sorry.
The most fun part of the meeting.
Who's over technology?
Like they're going to hate me asking this question.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to, I'll try to repeat myself as best I can. Going back to why we made the decision, I think I talked a little bit about looking at the metrics that we have in place to help us make the decision. And some of those metrics were not available to us. The student attendance rate, obviously we weren't in school. Bus driver attendance rate, again, not available. We weren't in school. Cafeteria workers rate, not in school. Substitute fill rate, again, not in school. So some of the metrics weren't available. However, one metric that was available that we looked at and monitored over the break was our teacher and school-based staff attendance. And I know Mr. Bolton monitored that for us over the holidays. And as he was monitoring that, the trend seemed to be that from an attendance standpoint for our teachers and school-based support folks, that the attendance rate did not look like it was going to be a problem for us, which, again, when we dismissed school, let me rephrase that, when we went to virtual learning, that we were having operational issues with staff attendance as well as a substitute fill rate. But as we were looking at that, the rate, the way it was coming in was around 95, 96% of attendance coming back on the first day of school. So we did look at that, and of course, the more people that are, and support staff and teachers that are in school, the fewer substitutes we need. So that was one of the driving forces. Another driving force was looking at the 7-day average of new cases when the week that we didn't have school in person and went to virtual. I think maybe during that week, the new cases, I think it went up over maybe 400 or 500 new cases a day. That 7-day average was right at 400 and something, I believe. And as we monitored that over the holidays, I think it maybe peaked around Christmas time. So in looking at that, it continued to decrease. I think right now it's about 34% less than it was during the week that we went to virtual learning. So again, the 7-day rolling average did go down. That's still high. I think what we'd rather see is, and Ron helped me with this, a number of around 122, 123 in terms of a 7-day average. But it's right now at 200 plus, 284. But it's still less than what it was during that week we were virtual. And it seemed like there was something else that I talked about. I'm not real good at remembering. I know there was another factor that we looked at, and maybe I'll think of it in just a minute. But also, we made, in terms of looking at this, we wanted to be able to safely open. So certainly the things that we've done all fall semester that allowed us to have school. And by the way, we had 70 days as a district, 70 days of in-person learning out of 75 days fall semester. And I think what helped us to achieve that was following the safety protocols, wearing the masks, the disinfecting, hand washing, staying home if you're sick, physically distancing, that sort of thing. So in terms of coming back, wanted to make sure that we continued to follow the safety protocols. Also, I think I talked a little bit about a vaccine that's not available for educators and staff yet, but hopefully soon to be, and maybe in February.
Mr. Thomas, Terry reminded me of your other points.
Oh, good. What was it, Terry? I thought about it a minute ago, but I forgot it.
It was just that you had committed to a promise to our 35,000 plus families.
45,000.
Oh, yeah.
45,000 plus families.
Yeah,
that we would, try to keep school open.
Right. We made a commitment to the parents of 45,000 of our students that we would provide an opportunity for in-person learning, provided that we felt like we could safely do that. So those were, I think, the primary considerations and things that we looked at. Obviously, again, I think I said this too, maybe I said it just now, but the fewer substitutes you need, the less problem we would have with the fill rate. That's what I was going to say. Our fill rate today was 67%. That's anything less than 70% puts us in the red. But that 67% was higher than it has been since October the 30th, so which is a good sign. Now, again, all this may turn a different direction in the next day or the next week or whatever, and we'll continue to look at school-by-school situations. And over the last couple of days, we've looked at school-by-school situations, and we're faring very well, right now. So Again, that's subject to change, but I think that was about everything. You can go, maybe the video, when we can go back and look at the video, you can compare, see how my memory.
How well you did. And the video will be available on the website immediately after this meeting, and so hopefully it shouldn't have a problem. It should be, it should all be there, hopefully. So.
And next time I'll make notes so I can go back and repeat verbatim what I said, but.
Thank you for going back through that. Okay. Mr. Watson, did you have something?
Well, Mr. Thomas, I appreciate you saying all that again. I think you did a great job repeating yourself, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things I just want the community to know is what I've seen in your leadership to this pandemic is you have been very consistent in your approach. And I think, if anything, I would hope that the community can trust that in those moments in the future, if and when you need to make that hard call, that you will. What I'm hearing you say is that in the absence of data, you felt like you made the move, you needed to make the move that you made. And the only thing that I'm hearing in the community is there's some that say, in the absence of data, we should have erred on more caution. And I'm not discussing right now which approach was right or not, but I do want to say that I think we can trust that you will be consistent in making the hard call when it's needed. So with the data that you have, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir, and absolutely, and thank you, appreciate that. And one thing we talked about in the absence of some data, if we don't go back, when do you go back? What is the point that you reach that you do go back? I don't know exactly what that would be until you go back and say, okay, we've tried this. And again, I got the question, so you're using teachers as guinea pigs? No. Not using teachers as guinea pigs. If I felt like that we couldn't safely go back and that the numbers didn't reflect that we could do that, I wouldn't do it. And I'll put myself as a guinea pig too, from a standpoint, if I'm using people as guinea pigs, then I myself consider myself as a guinea pig, but that's not what we were doing. We had school safely in the fall. We had some closures. We may still have some closures. They may be one at a time, two at a time. It could be the whole district in terms of virtual learning. I don't know. Don't have the crystal ball, but certainly we're going to continue to do what we feel like is in the best interest of our students and our teachers. And I've said too, we're in this for our students. That's the bottom line. And I know teachers have sacrificed and administrators have sacrificed, and shouldn't ask the question. I got my soapbox. Our teachers and administrators have absolutely done a phenomenal job. And if we could afford to pay them double what they make right now, that's what they deserve. So I appreciate Ms. Henderson too, keeping it on the forefront in terms of compensation and salary increases, because our teachers, and I was out in a couple of schools yesterday, teachers are just they're going above and beyond, and they have done this all semester, the call of duty. So kudos to our teachers and to our administrators for the excellent job that they're doing and continue to do, and agree with everything Ms. Coates said, in terms of how hard our teachers and administrators have worked, and I know y'all appreciate it, and I do appreciate it very much too, and we don't say it enough, and I know appreciation doesn't help buy groceries or pay the bills, but I do just appreciate what all of our folks are doing, even beyond teachers and administrators, our custodial staff, our maintenance staff, our school resource officers, our teacher assistants, our secretaries, cafeteria, everybody is just doing a phenomenal job. And that's why too, part of what I wanted to do, the superintendent's report, is that, and said this yesterday, hey, we need to forget politics. This is not about politics. This is about education. It's about doing what's best for the students of Tennessee, and hopefully, then when this legislature meets, they can unite and be on the same page and do what's right by the students of in the state of Tennessee. All public schools in Tennessee, not just Knox County, but across the state. So I will let you adjourn.
Thank you for that. And I think Mr. Watson makes a good point that you have been consistent in your thought process, and I think it's been prudent to look at closing schools on an as-needed basis. I looked back at the latest data that I saw by school. We had many schools that had zero staff and other multiple schools, that had 0 cases for students during the fall semester. So, so I hope that that's reassuring. I hope that that's reassuring to people, and I think that is a testament to our staff and how well they are doing what you've asked them to do. So I agree, and thank our staff tremendously for all the hard work. Every teacher, every person that works in a school, they've gone above and beyond. So we appreciate that immensely. Mr. McMillan?
Just a brief comment. I know everybody wants to get out of here, but you asked the question. First of all, I think you did an excellent job the way you handled it in the fall. By when one school would pop up or two, you would, close that for maybe a day or work through it some modified way. It seemed to work pretty well. And you asked the question, if you don't go back, when do you go back? According to Dr. Fauci, or whatever the guy's name is, I heard that he was predicting we might not be able to get out of it before fall, even with the vaccination. Obviously, we hope he's wrong. But the one thing I did want to say, and I still believe this, is most reasonable people believe the studies that show that kids learn better when they're in person, the socialization process, the whole thing, they're just much better off. Now, could there be some? Yeah, maybe so, if that's what their parents want. But we're not going to be able to satisfy everybody. And we did promise, as you said, to have schools open, keep them open for as many people as possible. And that's exactly what we need to do, if at all possible, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Okay, I think that is it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.